So you want to install a custom car audio system, but to do so, you need many different wires to connect the amplifiers, speakers, power, signal, etc. What wires do we need? How do we determine how long of each wire we should order? Why do we need fuses, and do they cause a bottleneck for the power in our system? That's all coming up in this video, where I'm showing you guys what I'm using wiring wise for my dad's sound quality daily driver Equinox build. So in a previous video, I mounted these amplifiers on an amplifier mounting plate that is mounted in the vehicle. It's a good idea to mount your amps on an amp rack like this so that they are nice and secure, and it also allows us to remove it from the vehicle so we can do some of our initial wiring. So we have two amplifiers here, a 6-channel amplifier for our speakers and a mono single-channel amplifier for our subwoofer. What wiring do we need to wire these up? Well, let's take a look at our package here from New Concepts. First off, we've got a bunch of speaker wire. This is, of course, to wire up the speakers and the subwoofers to the outputs of the amplifier. I went with the Karma series here. What I like about this particular wire is it has a round profile, which I find makes it nice and easy for routing through the vehicle. This is also OFC wire, or oxygen-free copper. So how do you determine how much wire you actually need in the vehicle? What I recommend that you do is just take a tape measure and just kind of get an estimate for each run. You don't want to spend a bunch of extra time determining the exact footage that you need, because honestly, it's best to have a little bit more anyways. So just kind of take an estimate, and then I'll usually add a couple extra feet for each of those measurements just in case. I write them all down, total them all up, and then I know what I need. Next up, we have our RCA signal wires. These are so that we can connect the signal from our aftermarket head unit and send it back to our amplifiers. For these, you want a high quality cable that has good shielding. In this case, I went with the New Concepts Crystal line. These are triple shielded and twisted pair, and I like using them for my builds because they come in a lot of different lengths and configurations. For example, this is actually a DSP amplifier, so I'm going to process the signal inside of it to do all of my tuning, and in order to send a signal to my subwoofer, I can also control that within this amplifier. So I'm actually going to connect the output right here of this amplifier to the input of my subwoofer amplifier. Now the next category for wiring is all of our different power wires. So we're going to have wire of different colors, so that's our ground wire. We also have a positive wire here. You could use red or you could use blue. And we have wires in different sizes as well. Just a quick tip for those of you that are new, it's important to have the same size ground wire as the same size power wire for each of your amplifiers. You want to match the power wire and the ground wire. And the reason for that is this is a complete electrical circuit that we're going to create. We don't want only this wire to be substantially sized, we want this wire to be large too. Now, how do you actually calculate the wire size that you need, and what other details go into planning all of the routing for wiring a system? I actually have a video all about that I'll put up in the corner of the screen, and I'll link it at the end of the video. For this particular project, I'm going to be using 0 gauge wire, of course, ground and power, and then I'm also going to be using 8 gauge wire. The plan here is I'll do 0 gauge from the battery back to our amplifier distribution block, and then I will do 8 gauge out of that for this guy here, and I will continue with the 0 gauge over for this amplifier here. Realistically, based on my calculations, I only needed 4 gauge to go from the distribution block over to this amplifier, but the thing is, I'm already buying 0 gauge anyway. This has a 0 gauge input, so I can just do that short little run, no problem. This wire here is New Concepts Colossus Flex wire. I like using this because, again, it is OFC wire, oxygen-free copper, and it is extremely flexible, which is super nice for doing an install. You can fit it around tight corners and tight bends, no problem. The final quick thing to remember in the power wire category is you're also going to want a remote signal wire. What this is for is you're going to connect it to a switched 12-volt source that comes on with the radio. With an aftermarket head unit, a lot of times this will be labeled as antenna, and what we're going to be using that for is on our amplifiers, we will connect it to the remote ins right here and here, and that actually tells the amplifier to turn on, because our power wire is always going to have 12 volts going to it because it's connected straight to the battery. Our ground is always connected to ground, so the amp needs to know when to turn on, and in this case, I'm going to be using the remote line. Now, as a side note, because I know some guys are thinking it out there, yes, there are amplifiers like these ones actually here that we can turn on a function that will actually detect the signal of the music coming into the amplifier in order to tell the amplifier to turn on. But I wanted to give you guys a lesson here that would apply to all amplifiers. All amplifiers have the remote in. The final category here is our wire distribution and fuses. So up near the battery, we're going to have our main fuse. More on why this is extremely important later. So we'll have the battery, we'll connect into this, then a wire will come out and it will go to the back of the vehicle. And then we need a way to distribute that wire, since it's going to be one large wire, into multiple smaller wires. And for that, we use this, a fuse distribution block. We'll come into this large block here and connect. And then you can see we have multiple outputs, each which will be connected with a fuse. Now this is for our power. We could also have a second block for our ground wires and that distribution. And rather than using a fuse, we're going to use these guys here. These are just a solid piece of metal, which turns this into a ground distribution block as opposed to a fuse block. These are the fuses. They have a little link of metal on the inside, so if we pull too much current through these fuses, like if we had a short circuit where this touched ground, or if the amplifier has some sort of issue, then that current will melt through that little link, thus breaking it, making it protect our system. Fuses are extremely, extremely important for protecting your vehicle and honestly keeping it from burning to the ground. But here's the thing, guys, I'm going to teach you a lesson here. When you're doing all the calculations for your amplifiers in order to determine what fuse size you even need, you're going to come up with a value and then you're going to go slightly larger so that the fuse isn't going to blow. So what that means is that you would never possibly pull more current through this fuse than it can handle. So don't think of a fuse as bottlenecking your system or prohibiting it from having as much power as it possibly could. This is total baloney. These prevent any problems from happening to your system, and they also prevent your car from burning to the ground, because when you have these, if your power wire were to become cut and somehow touch the ground of the vehicle, it's not going to create a short circuit and light the wire on fire. Long story short, use these fuses. If you want to know how to pick what size fuse you need, that's in that same video that I'm going to give you guys at the end. Now you could have all this wire and the wire distribution parts and be good to go to start wiring up your system, but we have one additional category here to really take your system to the next level, and that is some wire protection using this stuff called TechFlex. I actually made a full video about using this stuff before, way back in 2013. We're going to be using it again on this project. Our friends over at WireCare sent us a little package here. If you want to learn more about this stuff, I'll put a link down in the video description. But you can see there's multiple different colors here, and there's multiple different sizes. One of the most challenging things about this product is you have to determine the right size to actually use with your wire. It's a little bit longer of a process to explain, so if you guys would like to see that in a future video, let me know. Additionally here, I have a bunch of heat shrink. The heat shrink is so that I can secure the ends of the TechFlex to the wire, and this is actually special heat shrink. It's not normal everyday stuff, because you can see right there, see how it says 3:1? What that means is this will actually shrink down to 1/3 of its original size. The cheap stuff that you find elsewhere will only shrink down usually by about 1/2. Now, of course, to secure our wire to our amplifier rack and throughout the vehicle, we've got a bunch of different zip ties in different sizes here. And with that, it rounds out everything that we're going to need for the wiring of this vehicle. In the next video, I'll be showing you the full wiring of the vehicle, including the amplifier rack with the 2 amplifiers. You can catch that video along with the video that shows you how to calculate fuse and wire sizes here on screen. A special thanks to New Concepts for being a monthly channel sponsor. Learn more about their wiring down in the video description. Also, a special thanks to Lonnie, Ali, William, Marcos, Michael, Steve, Emmanuel, Jerry, and the rest of the Patreon membership team. A big thanks to all those guys for making these videos possible. As always, my friends, thank you for watching.